welcome to EVE Online. As you may be aware, EVE Online has recently gone free to play, so now's the perfect time to jump on board as an alpha clone. Now, what do I mean by alpha clone? Well, it turns out in EVE Online there are two different kinds of accounts. Traditional players, the ones who pay their monthly fee, just like the game used to be until recently, are called Omega clones, and they have access to all of the skills and all of the items in the game. Basically, it's the way the game always used to be. You pay your fee, and you play your game. However, EVE has now given us access to a free-to-play mode called Alpha Clones. You don't have to pay a monthly fee. The drawback is you're a little bit limited. You can only have a certain number of skill points, you can only learn certain skills, and because of that, you can only access certain items in the game. But there's still a lot you can do and a lot of trouble you can get yourself into, so I think it's worth checking out. Let's go ahead and create a new character here. Now this is the character creation screen in EVE Online. There are 4 races you can choose from: the Amarr, the Gallente, the Caldari, and the Minmatar, excuse me. Traditionally, it never really mattered which of these races you picked. One of the advantages of EVE Online, unlike a lot of other MMOs, in a lot of other MMOs, I should say, once you select your starting class, say you're a Paladin, you can't go on later and become a Orcish Hunter. You're limited. You can only be a Paladin forever. If you want to try different skills out, you have to start a new character, roll up a new tune. In EVE Online, it's not like that. You can do anything you want from any starting class, or race in this case. The only limit is your patience and willingness to put the time in. Any skill is open to anyone, given enough time and work. That's changed a little bit with the introduction of alpha clones. Because alpha clones are limited in the amount of skills that they can get and the specific skills that are open to them, picking a starting race does matter a little bit. Each of the races has their own strengths in terms of the kinds of ships they can fly. Caldari are very good with missile ships. Gallente are good with drones. Amarr are good with certain kinds of guns. There's not really any wrong answer. It all depends on your playstyle. But we're going to go ahead and, on this playthrough, start with Gallente. Now, there's a lot of different lore that goes into this, and we're going to skip most of it. For people who care to learn more about the lore behind the races and their relations with each other, there's a lot of information out there on the web, on the wikis, that you can go ahead and pick. We'll go ahead and pick a Jinmei character this time. And we'll select a male character. Now the game lets you go ahead and customize your character a bit, and I'll be back to you in just a few minutes after I've customized our character. Welcome back! The EVE Online character creation lets you do a lot of different customization, so we've created a wonderful character. We've gone ahead and taken a very nice character portrait that we can use going forward. We're just going to go ahead and start here from the beginning, and the character's name is going to be Alpaca Jones. And this is how other pilots are going to see us from now on. Those of you who are in the EVE Online fan group on Facebook will understand Alpaca is a bit of an in-joke nowadays with regards to the new alpha clones. And welcome to EVE Online. As you can see, our character is here in this spaceship. His very first ship, a Velator. Now, a Velator is a free ship that you get when you first start the game. Also, if you ever die, lose your ship and you don't have another ship available, a Velator is the ship that the game will give you for free. You have a sort of a pile of insurance that gives you one of these free ships, so at least you have something to get around in. To be honest, they're kind of useless. There's not a whole lot you can do in a Velator, but they're good enough to start off on, especially for someone like us who's just starting off the game with a brand new character. Here on the left is a little chat box from Aura. Aura is sort of a narrator in some ways of the game. Certain commands you do will get some feedback, vocal feedback from Aura. For example, when you activate your warp engine, she'll say warp engine activated. Warp drive activated, rather. She also sort of runs the tutorial of the game to walk you through your first few missions to get used to how the game works. So let's get started on that. Greetings, pilot. You've advanced to the elite status of Capsuleer, and my name is Aura. Basically, our first mission that they're going to give us is to take care of some NPC threats. Now, most of the game, for most people at least who play EVE Online, is actually not against NPCs. The game is really player-driven. A lot of the content is player versus player combat, player versus player trading, and unlike a lot of other MMOs, PvP is always active. In some games like World of Warcraft and such, there are safe areas where you never get into PvP, and there are, if you want to get into some player versus player combat, you go to those specific areas where you're going to know that you are now agreeing to fight. You are agreeing to be open to combat. EVE Online, the very act of undocking from a station and flying around in a spaceship, is your consent to PvP. Even the so-called safe systems, and I'll get into a little bit more about what makes a system safe. Even safe systems are, you're an open target, but everyone else is a target for you as well. So part of the game is learning how to defend yourself and how to not be a target. Unlike a lot of other games, dying doesn't really carry much of a penalty in EVE Online. Not anymore. It used to. You used to lose experience points, but that's changed. The worst that happens is you lose your ship. If it's an expensive ship, and if you have a lot of expensive fittings on it, you will lose some money to have to buy a new one, but you don't lose any of your skill points. And there's nothing to stop you from just buying a new ship and getting right back out into the fight. One of the hints that they say in EVE Online, one of the main pieces of advice that you should always remember is, never fly anything that you can't afford to replace. Well, right now we're in a brand new free ship, so we can afford to do anything in this thing. Another thing, let's go ahead and start flying here. We'll go ahead and increase our speed by pressing the plus command. That'll put us up to full throttle. We can fly around a little bit and take in some of these sights. Now, one of the ways that EVE Online is different than other MMOs is that in those MMOs, if you want to learn skills, if you want to level up, learn new abilities, learn how to fight using new spells and such, you need to go out and kill monsters, get experience, use your skills to get skill points and level them up. Not so in EVE Online. In EVE Online, you gain skills passively. You add them to a skill queue, and over time you learn them. If a skill takes an hour to learn, you add it to the skill queue. In an hour, you will own that skill. You will now have that ability and all the ability to equip items that comes with it, or the improvements to your targeting ability, or whatever else you've learned. The plus side is, well, hey, there's no grinding. If you want to learn that skill, you can learn that skill even when the game is logged off. If it says you're going to learn that skill in 1 hour, you can log off the game, come back in an hour, and you've learned that skill. So one of the pros to the way that EVE Online handles skills is there is no grinding. Now the drawback to that is there is no grinding. If you have a bunch of friends who want to get together and go on a roam, and there's one specific skill that you really wanted to learn so you could equip one specific piece of equipment onto your ship, and it's an hour away in terms of what you're going to learn, well, there's no speeding that up. You can't go out and grind and get that skill that much faster. You have to wait that hour. And when it comes to skills that might take 25 days later on in the game, well, you're stuck. It's just going to take as long as it's going to take. Now, that's changed a little bit more recently in EVE Online. They've added items called skill extractors and skill injectors that allow higher level characters, I should say there aren't really levels in this game, but characters with more skill points can extract some of their skill points and sell them on the open market. Lower skill point characters can buy those and use those, gain more skill points quickly, and apply them to the skills of their choice. And that kind of implies, it kind of points to one of the other major things about EVE Online, which is the market. The market is completely player driven, and anything that you can build, anything that you can buy, is usually made by other players. They've either found it in their own missions or they've built it themselves. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started on our first mission here. I'm skipping through a lot of what Aura's saying. She's just kind of saying that we're going to go on missions and we're going to learn things. So, speaking of skills in EVE Online, the way that you learn skills is you have to add them to your training queue. The way that you do that is up here on the top left. A little picture of your character here. If you click on that, it brings up your character sheet. And right here is a bunch of different skills I could learn, and these are different things that it'll say how long I have. For example, capacitor management. To the next level, I believe that's level 3, is going to require 5 days to learn. Learning that will get me a 5% bonus to my capacitor's capacity. Capacitor capacity. Energy grid upgrades is only 2 hours. That's going to increase by 5%. It's going to make CPU needs of different modules decrease by 5%. When you have a ship, one of the things that you need to be aware of is your capacitor, your CPU requirements. All of these items here, like guns, afterburners and such, require power. And one of the things you're going to have to learn how to do... Sorry, I hit the wrong button there. Is you're going to have to learn how to fit your ship. Here's a ship we're flying right now. See this Velotor? Up here at the top, I have 2 guns fit. These are what are called the high slots. Down here in our mid slots, I have an afterburner. And here in the low slots, I don't have anything. Here you can see that I have 79.4 CPU out of a total 150 are used, and a 21 out of 30 power grid. So I'm okay right now. The items that I have equipped, the modules I should say, are well within the maximums allowed on this ship. Later on in the game, as you start to equip better and better items on better ships, you have to be aware of how to balance the CPU versus your power requirements. And learning your basic skills helps with that. They reduce the amount of CPU required for certain items, the power draw of other items. But let's stop talking about all this different stuff and let's actually get into a mission here. Now if we click over here on this little face here, this little head, brings up our opportunities map. Now the first thing it wants us to do is to start our skill training, so let's do that. We'll open up our character sheet, we'll follow the directions here. And it wants us to go ahead and select a skill group and then drag a skill down to actually start training. It's recommending the signature analysis skill under the targeting section. So here under targeting, there's 3 skills we can learn, and one of them is signature analysis. It's a quick skill. It'll only take us about an hour and 18 minutes. Drag it down to your training queue, and we're learning the skill. In 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 35 seconds, that skill will be learned, even if we're logged out of the game. Let's have Aura suggest another opportunity for us. Now they want us to take a look around. Situational awareness is the key to your survival. We'll go ahead and close our character sheet here. So, we've moved the camera already, and I do that by holding the left mouse button and just kind of moving it around. We can look all around ourselves and check out this amazing vista. This amazing panorama of space. We can also zoom by using our scroll wheel on our mouse. Let's go ahead and move this out of the way here. We can zoom in, and we can zoom out. Check that out. We can also scout out the area. You can set the camera viewpoint to look at objects near you other than at your own ship, such as an enemy or an asteroid. So for example, let's look for some of these red icons that represent hostile ships. And there's one right down there. See that little red carrot? A narco pusher. If we right click on that, we can click look at. Ah, there he is. That's a narco pusher. It's an NPC hostile character. Now we can always go back to our ship by right clicking anywhere and saying look at my ship. It gets us back to our default view. And we got some money for that. Money in EVE Online is known as ISK. Most, 25,000 ISK, it's good at this point of the game, but it's really nothing to sneeze at. Later on in the game, higher level characters routinely deal in the billions and billions of ISK. But right now we'll take what we can get. Let's keep going through these opportunities until we can find some actual combat here. Now, one of the pieces of lore in the EVE Online universe is that these capsuleers, that's who you are, of course, are in pods inside these ships, and they're directly interfaced with the ship. Basically, you are the ship. Now, there are hostile ships in this area, part of a rogue cloning gang. We should get into position to take them out and remove their threat from the system. So, they would like us to find and approach the enemy. One way of doing that is we can scroll around here. Let's find one of these enemies here again. Let's find that narco pusher. If we go ahead and click on him. And another way you can do that is look over here on the right side of the screen. You see this box? I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. Oops. There we go. This shows us everything within what's called everything that's on grid, everything that's close to us. I can click on any one of these narco pushers in the area, and in fact, this is the one we were looking at. Oh, sorry, this is the one we were looking at. He's 30 kilometers away. Now that we've selected him, there's all kinds of things we can do with relation to him. Let's go ahead and approach him. That's right here, the approach command. What that means is we're basically going to go towards him. We're going to go towards him, and I don't know what's going to happen next. So the first thing we can do, whenever you're in combat, one of the things you want to do is you always want to, you don't always want to, but one of the things you can do is orbit your enemy. The default orbit command is going to be at 1,000 meters. I'm going to go ahead and click that now. It's going to bring us to within 1,000 meters of him. And we're going to orbit. Now, if I wanted to change that, I could right-click on him here. Or, sorry, I meant to say left-click. Left-click and hold. I can select the orbit command here, and then by moving my mouse in or out, I can change the distance at which I'm going to orbit him. Different enemies require different distances. But right now, we're getting close to this guy, and, well, we're about to probably get into a fight. Let's minimize this for a moment. Now, here we have some guns. A civilian Gatling railgun. And here we have a mining module. Well, that's not going to be very useful to us. Now, what I just did, let me redo that again here. I clicked the C. I clicked on our guy that we're orbiting, and I clicked C, so I can look at him. I can see what he's doing. It's going to keep the camera on him. We're tracking him. And, well, let's get into a fight. To start firing, you just click your module. Actually, I forgot something. My mistake. First thing you have to do is you have to target the enemy, and that's right here. That would be hitting the control button or clicking here. Once you target an enemy, well, the enemy knows that you're targeting it, and that usually starts combat. Let's open up our guns and fire. What'll happen is the enemy that we've targeted will automatically be shot at by our guns. Up here you can see his... Oh, he's already gone. That was quick. And let's go ahead and slow down our ship here. And he's exploded. He's gone. And he's left behind a narco pusher wreck. Right there. Let's go ahead and approach that wreck now. And once we get close enough, we can use... we can open up his cargo and see if there's any loot. Well, he's got a few different items here. We'll go ahead and loot all of it. Maybe we can sell that back at a space station somewhere. Let's try another one of these guys. Now, if you hit the C button, it'll ask you which target you want to track. You can go ahead and click here in the overview, or you can click directly on him, and it'll keep the camera on the guy. Again, let's go ahead and target him. Oh, and actually, notice here, see these little red boxes around these other enemies? They're attacking us. We are in combat, even though we haven't started fighting. Let's go ahead and start shooting this one guy before we take too much damage. Now up here you can see this little circle here on the upper right here. See those little red areas that are growing? The white areas are shrinking? I'm doing damage to him and taking him out. And I'll explain all that in a moment, but first we need to target the rest of these guys. Oops. What I'm doing is I'm targeting several of the guys at once. Pressing the control key to target, and then I'm clicking on the guy that I want to target. And actually, I'm too far away from some of them to actually target. So let's start heading back. What I wanted to show you is that, and you might have been able to see that very briefly, is that you can have more than one enemy targeted at a time, as you can see here. By clicking on one of them, I can select that one as my active target. Your active target's going to be the one that your guns attack. So now that I've clicked on this narco pusher, I'm going to go ahead and click guns. We're going to attack him. We're still getting hit by this clone jacker punk. Go ahead and get into an orbit around him and shoot him as well. As you can see, the circle is going around our gun. Every time it goes, our gun fires, and then it takes about a second to recharge, and that's what that circle going around it is doing. It's letting us know when the gun is ready to fire again. That gun will automatically keep firing until there's no more target. Alright, the other narco pushers are a little too far away. But there's still this rogue clone lab. Let's take a look at that thing. A rogue cloning facility. That's something run by those, looks like that's something run by those bad guys there. Let's destroy it. And as you can see, nothing's happening. Unfortunately, this is a new starter ship, and, well, there's not a whole lot we can do to a actual building like that, an actual location. But it's shooting us. Oh, I'm sorry. We're still shooting at my mistake. I thought I stopped. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of damage that we can do to this thing. This thing is pretty much a hardened defended point. Oh well, no big deal. Let's find these wrecks and go ahead and try to loot them real quick. You have to be within about 2,500 meters to be able to open up a wreck and see what's inside. Heading for this clone jacker punk wreck. Again, we'll loot all. And all these items are things that we could potentially add to our ship later. As you can see, these icons are showing that we've already looted the wrecks. It has wreck empty. This is a wreck that still has items in it that we can loot. The overview here, you'll find, is it's a lot easier to operate by looking at the overview than by trying to scroll around and find where your enemies are, in a 3D environment like this. This overview is going to give you everything you need to know. And in fact, there are things you can do, and there are many guides online on how to do this, where you can customize your overview to better work for different applications. If you're going to be doing PvP, if you're going to be doing mission running, or if you're going to be doing mining or different things. In fact, there's already some tabs laid out here. Let me go ahead and stop our ship real fast. There's a mining tab that focuses specifically on nearby asteroids. There's warp to locations. Those are the different planets in the systems and some of the stations. And the general tab, which includes nearby ships, as well as some things in range like planets and local stargates and such. As well as the local space station. Well, we took out some enemies, got some money for completing a couple missions, and we've got some new items that might be useful in our ship. Let's head back to the station. That's a pretty good beginning to this, to our career here. Now, what you'll find is there's two different kinds of players in EVE Online. There's those who are used to other types of MMOs that will hold your hand, really, and players really aren't allowed to get away with scamming you, engaging in PvP when you don't want to, and such, and the game is really very much holds your hand and gives you a bunch of content. The game provides the content for you. Because EVE is very different than that, in that scamming's allowed. As long as they're not cheating by breaking the game mechanics, out here in space, if somebody wants to trick you into giving up your money for something that doesn't exist, or if they can convince you to do something harmful to yourself, or they want to engage you in PvP and kill you, they're allowed to. So like I said, there's two kinds of people. People who are used to that first kind of MMO often find EVE Online a little bit off-putting, and sometimes they rage quit and don't come back. Or they go into the forums and they complain, this person scammed me and I should be able to get my money back, or I should be allowed to fly around in mine without being harassed. Folks like that, I find, typically don't last too long in EVE Online. On the other hand, if you understand that, well, you're going to die. And that's okay. You're going to die over and over again. You are going to lose ships. That's just a part of this game. People are going to try to kill you. Some people might try to help you. But most of the content that's out there is player driven. And don't get too attached to any one ship, no matter how blingy or fancy it is. When you die, if instead of lamenting that, if you look at it and say, well, how did I die? What could I have done differently that time? What could I have done to maybe be better prepared? If I was mining and someone came along and blew up my mining ship that was mining asteroids, what could I have done differently to make my ship better shielded? Or to be ready, maybe have somebody nearby ready to defend me? What could I have done differently? If you go into the game with that sort of attitude, and if you go into the forums asking those sorts of questions, you'll find that EVE Online is actually a very helpful community, a very friendly and open community that's willing to help out new players as long as they display the right kind of attitude. If you come in with a very entitled attitude, thinking that the game's supposed to just hand things to you, hand you fancy mounts just because you've played for a certain amount of time and completed the right number of quests, well, you're not going to find a very friendly response, unfortunately. And unfortunately, a lot of people getting that response get turned off to EVE, when really it's a great game for people if you're willing to give it the right attitude and understand what it is and what it isn't. Either way, we warped to a local station here. I clicked on the station. These squares mean stations. I warped to it by using the warp to command here, and now that we're close, we can dock with the station.
Docking permission requested. Docking request accepted.
Once you're in the station, there's a lot of things you can do, including fitting your ship, changing the modules on your ship and such, also doing some trading, and you can do trading out in space, but being in a station is pretty much the only place in EVE Online where you're absolutely safe. No one can kill you in a station. You're safe here. This is where you can take a bit of a break, take a look at your ship, and take a look at the, what you want to do with it. For example, I'm going to hit Alt F and bring back up that fitting window. Here's my Velator here. I'm also going to bring up my inventory, which would normally be Alt-C if you're using keyboard shortcuts. Now, for example, some of these new items I got a civilian shield booster. If you right-click on that and show your info, expend some energy to provide a quick boost in your shield strength. And here's items, here's some statistics which will tell you what sorts of damage it protects against, the effects that it'll have and such, how much it's going to cost, because activating that will cost energy. When you fit it, how much CPU and power grid is going to use. Remember I talked about the CPU and power grid down here? And it requires a medium power slot. Well, we have an open medium power slot. So, let's go ahead and add that to our ship. We drag it over here and we put it right in the slot. Now notice our CPU went down, we have a little bit less available. Our power grid is up to 20 out of 30. Or down to 20 out of 30. So this is what we have left here. We have 77 CPU left and 20 power grid. We also got a damage control unit. Let's drag that. Those are low slots. And one way you can know that is if you look at right here, you see the little markings above. The number 1 is how many of them there are. This is a low slot indicator. This is a high slot indicator. This is something I actually can't use right now. I have to be an Omega clone. You have to be a paid user to use this Gatling pulse laser. That's one of the unfortunate things about being a free player is, unfortunately, some items are unavailable. But that's alright, there's still a lot of trouble we can get into. Now we're down to 67 CPU and only 18 power grid. Using one of these armor repairers puts us down to 16 and 66, but we're still good. Now with these new items, let me show you how that all works and how our ship's hit points work out in the field. We're going to go ahead and click undock here. After about a moment or so, it'll give us docking clearance and we'll be back out of the station. There's 2 more things I'm going to talk about really quickly before we end for the day. In our next episode, we're going to get into some actual trouble and maybe go find some PvP. But first, let's talk more about our ship here. Down here on the bottom is our interface, and I briefly showed this as we got into combat. Remember those guns that were in our high slots? Well, they're right here. Here's our Gatling railgun, and a mining laser. If we wanted to go find some asteroids and mine minerals for money, we could do that. Take those minerals back to the station and sell them. Make more ISK. To use them, you got to click on them. They're what they call active modules. I got to click on it when I'm targeting something, whether that's a ship or an asteroid. And that's this, remember? This is that icon for the high slots. Now here, 2 dashes is your icon for your mid slots. I have a afterburner. Let's click on it and see what happens. See how my speed is 350 meters per second when it's maxed out here? Remember I clicked here to stop, clicked here to go to max speed. I could also click anywhere on here to pick a speed somewhere in the middle. There's not really a whole lot of situations where you're going to need to do that. You're either going somewhere or you're not. Let's go back to full speed here. This ship's max normal speed is 350 meters per second. But if we have an afterburner, we'll wait for the speed to get up to max here for just a moment. Okay, we've reached 350 meters. Now, if I click on the afterburner begins firing, and it will fire until this makes its way all the way around, even if I turn it off. If I turned it off now, it would continue firing until its cycle is complete. Now look at our speed. Our speed is climbing. We're at 530 meters per second. And it's continuing to climb, but it's starting to level off a bit. We're going a lot faster. That's a pretty useful item there. Now, what you may notice here is, look here in the middle. You see these 3 lines? That's our capacitor. it's down to 97%. Using this afterburner is using up capacitor charge. Now I'm down to 95%. Went back up to 96. It's going to hover around in the 90s. Now what if I start using my shield booster? Let's go ahead and click on that. It's going to increase my shield. Gives us a HP bonus every 3 seconds. Now we're down to 91% capacitor. So as you can see, using modules, guns, any active modules that I have to click on is going to use capacitor. If that capacitor goes down to 0, my modules turn off. I can't use them until I have capacitor left. Until I get back capacitor, which recharges over time. Now there are items you can equip that give you more capacitor, that recharge your capacitor. There are also items you can equip that can drain the capacitor from an enemy. That's pretty useful in PvP. We'll go ahead and shut those off now. See, they're continuing to fire. It's glowing red until it completes its cycle, at which point it will stop. There we go, it's done. And now capacitor is going to begin climbing back up to 155. Down here at the bottom was a similar item, my armor repair. I would click on that to begin repairing my armor. Let's turn that back off. And here's my damage control. Now damage control is something different. It's not an active module. I don't click on it to use it. By simply having it in this slot, it has an effect on my shield damage resistance, my armor damage resistance, and my hull damage resistance. It just makes my ship a little bit tougher by having this here. Now down here, you might see 3 white bars. See them? 3 concentric circles? Well, that's my hit points. The outer bar is my shield. As I get attacked, the shield's going to drain down and turn red and go down to here. The next one is my armor. Different weapons affect shields and armor differently. Generally, your shields are going to fail, then your armor starts burning away, and then you're down to your hull. When your hull's gone, your ship's gone, and you're dead. Now, that doesn't always go in order. Like I said, there are different weapons that, depending on the types of shield you have and the types of weapons that are being used, might pass through your shield and just start affecting your armor directly, or take them out at the same time. But that's something to keep an eye on. You need to keep an eye on your hit points here, or you're done. If you ever start getting low on hit points, best thing you can do is find that closest station and click the warp button. Now I can't warp because I'm actually too close to the station. You have to be a bit of a ways away from the station before you can warp to it. And that's fine. We don't have to warp there right now. Now the final thing I wanted to mention, check out that moon there. Final thing I wanted to mention is security status. Not going to come in too, it's not going to be too important right away, but it's something to remember. Remember when I said there's not really any such thing as a safe place, there's no safe zones in EVE. The exception to that is, because I'm a brand new character, the stations that you start off in when you're a brand new character, brand new characters are for the most part hands-off. You have a little bit of time to get to know the game if you're a brand new player. However, if you leave that starting system, which you're going to want to do, you're an open target. You're making yourself a target. Next to the system here, next to the system name, it says 1.0. That's the security status. 1.0 is what they call high sec. In high sec, aggression against other players is not allowed. Now, it happens. What that means is the game will allow it, but there will be reprisals from the local NPC police officers known as Concord. They'll show up to avenge you. They'll show up and destroy your attacker, but you might still be dead. And that's a tactic that some PvP players use. They show up with a ship that has incredible offensive capabilities, very little defense, strong enough to destroy you in one hit, or very quickly before the police show up. They die, but you've still been killed. Then their friends show up and loot your corpse. Now, looting your corpse is also not allowed in high sec, and they get marked as a criminal, and anybody can now attack them without repercussion. But they've got all their friends with them. They're willing to fight, and this is a established and approved of tactic. It's called suicide ganking. The reason I mention that is I'm trying to say don't get too comfortable just because you're in what's called high sec. Anyway, the systems that go from 1.0 down to 0.5 are considered high sec, and Concord will respond to any aggression by showing up and destroying the ship, by destroying you. Unless it's approved of agree to duel. There are such things as duels. You can propose a duel and somebody can accept it, and then you can just attack each other freely. From security rating 0.5 downwards to about 0, it's what's called low sec. Their attacking is allowed, but doing so will lower your own personal security rating with regards to things like Concord and some of the NPC empires. Below that, at the 0.0 and lower, you have what's called nullsec, and, well, anything goes in nullsec. Now, some of the most lucrative opportunities exist in nullsec. It's a place that every player should go eventually. A lot of people are afraid to go there, and they really shouldn't be. It's learning to survive in nullsec is the way that you really make money in this game and the way that you succeed. You just have to be aware that anybody can and most likely will kill you, so just be ready before you go there. Either way, that's enough for a first day. We're far enough away from the station that I can go ahead and warp back. Let's click on the station, click warp to, warp us within 0, should get us nice and close. We'll activate our warp drive. All ships in EVE have a warp drive that lets them travel far distances quickly. You can't do anything when you're in warp. You can't do combat and such. There are modules that you can use in PvP that prevent your opponent from warping. Keeps them there and makes them unable to escape. We'll get into all that later. And we're going to dock with the station here. Alright, and that's it for today. If anything I said wasn't really clear, because I've been playing this game for a while. I used to be an Omega clone, or rather, I used to pay for my subscription. Now that the game's gone free to play, I've rejoined, and I decided to start with a brand new character so I could make this video series. So because of that, there's a lot of stuff that I know that I might just be glossing over because I'm forgetting to explain it. If there's anything that's unclear, feel free to mention it in the comments. I'll try to answer it in the comments, or I'll discuss it in the next episode. Otherwise, I think that's good for today. In our next episode, we're going to go out and we're going to try to find some actual PvP. I'll see you then.